The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. My name is Claire Dooley. Today is November 17th, Monday, 2025 in the year of our Lord. I am Claire Dooley. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I wanted to talk with you guys a bit today about the coverage that we did at Children's Health Defense in partnership with Steve Bannon in the War Room. And then also I'm going to end up changing our discussion to the MAHA Summit that recently happened and bringing in Dr. Sue Peters, a neurodevelopmental scientist, to talk a little bit about it. But before we get started, I wanted to show you guys a clip that is from the show at the Children's Health Defense Conference.
We're live from the Children's Health Defense Conference in Austin, Texas. It's called the Moment of Truth. So why am I here? Why am I hosting? Who am I? I'm a documentary filmmaker. I've been making films for the past 10 years about health freedom. I watched the movie Vaxxed at 15 years old and decided that it was something I wanted to give my life to. There is nothing more important than preventing brain injury in children. There's nothing more important than preventing a mother from holding her lifeless child whenever that could have been prevented. And she was giving that child a medical intervention that she was told would help her baby, when in fact it did the exact opposite. And then she's left to deal with the consequences. She's left to pay the medical bills. She's left to go search for the doctors that can actually help her. The medical industry has abandoned these families. They've gaslit these families, and I would go so far as to also say that they're covering it up. That was what the Vax movie was about. It was about the CDC covering up fraud. They knew that the MMR vaccine was causing autism, and instead of telling the American people, they hid it. That's a crime against humanity. In 1986, the Congress passed an act that took away liability from vaccine manufacturers. So many children were being injured that the pharmaceutical companies came to Congress and said, hey, we can't keep making vaccines because we can't ensure the supply of them because we're getting sued so much. So we gave them legal immunity. And what happened after that? The vaccine schedule tripled, right? Children today get 3 times, almost 4 times as much as people did 40, 50 years ago. So that's what we're dealing with. This is the scene that we're in. We are in an epidemic of chronic illness. And I have brought on a guest today that we're going to throw off the show with to talk a little bit about this chronic illness epidemic. And why? Because it affects every single American person. Think about your life. Who do you know who's died of cancer? Who do you know who's died of heart disease? Who do you know who has autism? Any kind of developmental delays or disabilities. I mean, who do you know who's in a wheelchair, who's had to have a stent put in their heart, who's had to be in and out of the hospitals, in and out of urgent cares? I mean, this is an issue that is way more pervasive. This affects every single American human being. And I think that that's why the posse needs to be here. That's why they need to be in the room, because this is on their hearts, even if they don't know it. So today, joining me right now is Tony Lyons. We're live from the Children's Health Defense Conference, and we're going to be talking to him about why it's important. Why are we here? What are we doing? How are we trying to fix things? I call Tony Lyons the offense. I call Children's Health Defense the defense. So thank you so much for joining us, Tony.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. Yeah, 76% of the American public suffers from a chronic disease. That is an epidemic of just unheard of proportions. So all around the world, countries spend less money and have so much better health outcomes. And that's because we have captured government agencies, we have corrupt public officials, and we have these big companies that are controlling everything. And we need to fight back. So, what's really happened now is that in the course of 1 year, the whole narrative has changed. So millions and millions of Americans who trusted anything they were told because they were lied to, they were propagandized, they were convinced by these companies that spent billions of dollars doing it. They were really brainwashed.
And we can tap into that a little.
So you guys can find the full clip with Tony Lyons on Rumble. If you look up War Room CHD, you should be able to find that. And also, there's a lot of other great coverage that we did. So we covered Polly Tommy, Brian Burrows, the editor and producer of Vax 2 and 3, along with Andy Wakefield, who you all know, and Brian Hooker. So we kind of had this Vax reunion. We talked in the show about a little bit about behind the scenes of what happened with the documentaries and what's happened since then. The first Vax movie came out 10 years ago, and it changed my life, and it made me the person that I am today. And it honestly made me dedicate the rest of my career thus far to the vaccine injured. So, that coverage was amazing. We moved on to talk with Mary Holland and Stephanie Lucrecio. And then through the weekend, Leslie Manukian, Catherine Austin Fitz. There's a lot of really great interviews that actually haven't been released yet that will be released. So if you want to check those out, go to my website, clairedooleyfilm.com, and sign up for our email list, and I will send them out as soon as they come out. I wanted to switch subjects to now the MAHA Summit that happened last Wednesday. I was able to attend this. I wrote an article on it called Inside the MAHA Summit, an Ex-Vaxxer's Take. The biotech revolution is here, and we get to define how it serves us, not the other way around. So I attended this summit, and as a young documentary filmmaker who has traveled the country interviewing thousands of parents with Polly Tommy on the CHD bus about their vaccine injuries, as I just said, I've dedicated most of my career thus far to this. I'm not going to give up easily. I'm not going to just bow down to some biotech company, right? But that's not what this is. What you saw at the MAHA Summit was a lot of the different leaders in the biotech industry coming forward and giving us their opinions, giving us, talking to us about what they're doing. And we can go in the room and we don't have to agree with them. With MAHA, we win by having a better argument, not by censoring other people. So that was what this article was about. It was about my experience there. You guys should definitely go check it out. It's on Substack, called Inside the MAHA Summit, an Ex-Vaxxer's Take. Read the whole thing, and I would love to get your feedback. But there's definitely some pieces missing from this article. We put it out pretty quickly right after the summit happened. And to be honest, we couldn't really go that deeply into transhumanism and digital IDs and all these different concepts. So I brought on someone today who I would love to chat with this topic. And this is Dr. Sue Peters. Dr. Sue, thank you so much for joining us.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Claire. And I absolutely loved your article, and I appreciate the ability to give you feedback.
Yeah, I'm super excited to hear it. Sue, do you want to give us a little bit about your background? What was life like before you joined CHD? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, my history actually begins in the 90s. I've had a chronic illness for most of my life, and I became involved in the technology industry in the late 90s, and was the co-founder of a tech company called BrainDoc, and our mission was to really to provide wireless content, software, data to individuals to empower them with access to what we called the mobile internet back in 2000. And around that same time, I read the book, The Age of Spiritual Machines by Ray Kurzweil. And this was sort of a convergence for me to learn about transhumanism as a computer scientist. That I then went on to become a neuroscientist to get my PhD studying infant brain development. Well, I was studying PTSD and infant brain development. But prior to that, one of the last courses I took was artificial intelligence. And I was always interested in emotional intelligence. And
And this was artificial intelligence course. Like, what year is this? Right?
This was, yeah, good question. That was in 2006, 2007.
Before artificial intelligence was a household topic,
Right. And so then, and for me, my history very much has been at what I call the upslope of the hype cycle, where it's understanding and being involved in very new technologies before they break through into mass adoption. And so I was very interested in transhumanism because I saw it as something that could help benefit humanity. Well, then basically I finished my PhD in 2017. I was funded by the National Institute of Mental Health to study typical brain development in infants. My expertise is in sleep, and I use dense array electroencephalography. So you put sensors all over the head of the infant to measure brain rhythms. And so NIMH was interested in, or I proposed to them, and they funded me to study how these brain rhythms could be used as biomarkers to predict the onset of a developmental disorder. And in that work, I also was able to teach. I had the opportunity to teach undergrads and graduate students about developmental disorders. And it was around then that I started to question why we were injecting children with neurotoxins, healthy children, infants, and it just didn't make sense to me. And the arguments that I kept getting back from my colleagues were just so appealing or comforting, and so that began my journey into going outside of the academic system and trying to explore some of these questions. Now, along with that, my own chronic illness had been, I'd finally gotten to the root cause, which was that I was MTHFR 677TT, which is one of the more rare versions of that methylation gene. And it had affected me with severe heavy metal toxicity, which had affected my cognition, my sleep, which is one of the reasons why I became very interested in how sleep affects cognition, and the developing brain over infancy is very much tied into sleep and sleep brain rhythms. So I then became COVID hit, and I had the opportunity, incredible honor, to be in the inaugural class of the Children's Health Defense Fellowship in 2022, and worked on was able to work on the My Cycle Story team and publish our work looking at the COVID vaccine and shedding and the effects of that. But so fast forward then to the presidential campaign, and I worked as a national director for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for his campaign, and then that sort of led me into the MAHA movement, as so many of us led into the MAHA movement. So I guess I just wanted to tie this loop in terms of being someone who was interested in understanding how the brain develops and the emotional brain, and then transhumanism. It was as a PhD fellow gave me the opportunity to start to question the role of technology in our health, and what this path of transhumanism really was about. And Ray Kurzweil was an acquaintance of mine, and I believe he's very much an optimist, but there's a question of spirituality, and there's a question of more immortality that goes along with all of this. And so I was able to sort of take a step back and recognize how we need to be more engaged in our own health and what we do with the data that we collect, the bio signals, the wearable devices, which was a part of my research as well. And so I see kind of both sides of that in my experience.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of concepts to, a couple words I want to throw out there, give definitions for, which is, transhumanism, which I define as the merging of humans and machines. And the culture around transhumanism, you have a lot of minds at Harvard, at Oxford, at Cambridge, who are discussing, merging humans with machines to create a new being. And many people would call that playing with God. You also have this term scientism, which is basically the worship of science, right? So instead of the church in the past, you would have, the worship of science, as in, if you criticize science, you're attacking. If you attack me, you're criticizing science. I think Tony Fauci said that at some point as well. Mm-hmm. So we do have this really particular instance that we're in where, in my opinion, there are a lot of technologies that are coming up that are looking to take advantage of our data, our privacy, and ultimately can be used to control us. But tools are tools and technologies are technologies, and they can be used for good or bad. So I'm definitely not here to drive any fear around technology, but what we are here to do is to remain suspicious, to remain aware, and to remain cautious. And there's a lot of things that we can do. Sue, in my article, I covered the first couple panels, and then later on, as I was backstage chatting with some of these minds that I covered in the article, you were attending some of these panels as well. Towards the end, I kind of wanted to dive into, what your reflections were on those ending panels, Russell Brand's eloquent rant, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I had the real wonderful opportunity to be able to attend the CHD conference and then the MAHA Institute the following Wednesday. And I thought it was a really interesting juxtaposition of two worlds. And I was actually volunteering at the MAHA Summit. And so I spent the first half of the day checking in people, which was fantastic, because I actually got to meet people from all areas of health research, and in particular, one of my own personal heroes who I've never met in person, but he's probably the one that introduced me first to how the MTHFR affected my health, and that was Dr. Ben Lynch. And then, like moments later, I met the founder of 23andMe, Wojcinski. I'm just forgetting her first name, but it was really this kind of wild bridging of two worlds, of bringing the functional medicine, the medical freedom world together with the biotech industry, and two worlds that I've been very engaged in and involved in. And so I missed the first half of the day, but your article really helped give me some insight into that. And I was able to attend both the sessions on athletes, and it was sort of like a biohacking discussion about what are your top biohack tools to help you physically. And I was very happy to hear that two of the panelists, Dana White being one of them, placed cold water therapy as their top hack. And that's something I do every day in New York, where I live. I go into the ocean with the community and experience cold water therapy. And then the other session that I attended was on AI. And it was really interesting being kind of in the center front of the room, where I could see people within the medical freedom movement and from CHD sitting around me, and then other people more at the outskirts, and seeing their faces as they took in this information and responded to some of it. And the AI session, I think, was a little bit uncomfortable for some of the medical freedom people in attendance, from what I could tell, because there was discussion about basically needing all of this data to health data to fund the advancement of artificial intelligence to be used to help us with our health. but also a discussion about removing, not wanting it to be regulated, and was very disconcerting. But in my own personal experience, what I've found, dating back 30 years of working in this environment, is some things really are inevitable in terms of how technology is being driven. So, for example, mapping the human genome was a big event in the late 90s, and people were concerned about that. But there were tools put into place that could protect people from their personal genetics being used in some negative way toward them if they chose that. And so what I've learned over the years is that, I don't believe that we're going to stop this drive of technology to help us better understand our health. And I will say, so I do think that it's inevitable that there's going to be some subset of the population that allows their data to be used to inform the future artificial intelligence that's going to help us heal. But what is really needed is the ability to make decisions about your own personal data. And I think, that's two of the things that I found that were missing were any discussion of informed consent. So, allowing people to make the decisions themselves about what they will and won't participate in. And then something else that I find really interesting is not being discussed like it was, say, in 2019, which is the ownership of your data and the ability for you yourself to monetize it. So, there's always been, for 30 years, there's been this idea that you can participate in a technology and receive that technology for free in exchange for your data. But I think we need to start looking at this again as my data has value. And number one, I get to choose whether my data is part of the system, is going to be used. And then secondly, if I am going to contribute it, allow me to monetize it, allow me to benefit from it. So, when we talk about wearable devices, we should have the choice of devices that keep the data private, but allow us to inform ourselves, whether it's for biohacking or understanding our own chronic illness. So for me, I used these devices to study my own sleep, to study emotion in the brain and the subjects that I worked with, the college students, and then also the autonomic nervous system as it relates to brain rhythms in infants, all using wearable devices where we controlled the data and kept it private within our lab. This is possible. And we should really not give over to the idea that our data belongs to the corporate class, where they can monetize it, and we have.
I just want to jump in there, Sue. I'm a 26-year-old. I have an 18-month-old baby. I've got hopefully a long life ahead of me, and I cannot afford to live in fear. But what I can also not afford to ignore the red flags that I see come up, like some of the things that some of the people said at the MAHA Summit, that were on the stage, like CEO of CRISPR is there, right? Like Neuralink, DJ Seo is there, George Yancopoulos of Regeneron. I can't afford to ignore those either. But it doesn't mean that we have to live in this world where we just throw our hands up and say, oh, well, it's inevitable. They're going to steal all of our stuff. What you're saying is so important, because you're saying, look, no, I've been in this industry. I know it's possible. And it is possible. And I know that we have a future where we can move forward with technology without being afraid of it and use it for good and not allow it to be used for bad. And that's why informed consent is important. That's why this conversation we're having right now is important, because this is the way that we move forward. I know before that we mentioned as well, one big thing Catherine Austin Fitts mentions is using cash, right? And I thought that you had some particular thoughts about Russell Brand's eloquent rant when it came to localized action. I would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I was So yes, the conference ended rather than what was on the original schedule, which was a speech, I guess, by Secretary Kennedy. It ended with Russell Brand, and I don't know if this was by design, but his speech or eloquent rant was so powerful because, at least from my experience of the day, it was the first time the medical freedom community had been truly represented in terms of he gave a history of COVID. And I looked around the room and I saw some real shock and disdain on some faces, which presumably were people maybe from the pharmaceutical industry or the biotech industry who really haven't been focused on those issues. So I saw it as an opportunity to where the conference was bringing these two worlds together, and Russell addressed that in the very beginning. And he used it as an opportunity to really educate people while also maybe kind of comfort those of us who knew and experienced everything that he was talking about. And so what I absolutely loved was the way that he talked about decentralization. And as a neuroscientist, I have always thought about how the brain works in terms of top-down versus bottom-up intelligence. And we in our world have a tendency to put too much reliance on this top-down or centralized approach. And he spoke just after the AI panel, I believe, and where they were talking about this centralization of data. And so it was really great ending for Russell to talk about decentralizing. So we can do that in all aspects of our lives. We can, and it really is a focus on localization of our food, of our community, but even your data, even if you choose to use wearables and how you use that data, you can choose devices that give you informed consent, that give you control of your data, and that allow you to use it in a localized, decentralized way. Decentralization is so important, and bottom-up intelligence is so important because that is where emergent technologies, emergent intelligence comes from in the brain and within our environments. So I was so happy to see the way that he ended the talk. And, like I said to you earlier, Claire, these little things that we can do, like Catherine Austin Fitts teaches us to use cash. That's also a form of decentralization. And so I think we can have our foot in both worlds if we choose to, and we can consciously choose how we interact with technology.
Yeah. Absolutely. We can constantly choose how we interact. And I think that, the viewers of CHD TV, Catherine Austin Fitts has a show on Thursdays where she breaks all of this down. I choose to be a chronic optimist about this situation that we're in. And not that Catherine isn't, but Catherine, she's going to lay it out as it is. I mean, she's literally saying, look, there is a plan to enslave you with your own money and your own data. And I totally agree with her. And so that's why her voice and her perspective is so important in this fight as well. Dr. Sue, where can people find you? I don't know if you're on social media and stuff.
Yeah, I am. My X handle is No More Wires, which is an interesting connection to my history in wireless data technology, and that's really the best place actually to get in touch with me, or by email, which is sp@suepeters.com.
Sue, we have another 2 minutes in this segment. I wanted to finish on a couple of your thoughts about dedicating our efforts, half of our efforts of which are to prevention of chronic illness, and half of which are to picking up the pieces of this mess that we're in.
Yeah. So in your article, you used the example of how we might be able to use the technology and the knowledge that we have to test whether individuals would be more susceptible to interventions. And there's, to me, the only reason that we haven't done that so far is simply a protection of the vaccine program, and this idea, this spell that, as Mary Holland so beautifully put it in the past, that vaccines are safe and effective. And the second that you make even a suggestion that someone could be injured or be susceptible to injury is a problem for that industry. So breaking that spell, whereby we can, I really do think it's important that we as a medical freedom community consider that there are people who are already injured, and there are people who are dealing with chronic health issues that do need shortcuts to help them become functional again. But at the same time, we need at least 50% of our energy going into understanding the root cause of illness. And I'll just say, from a neuroscience perspective, how we've understood the brain from a scientific point of view is through brain injury, dating back 200 years. So, that's how we've been able to map out the different functional components of the brain. But now it's time for us to bring things back into also a holistic view and a functional view, and really understand how we can understand the root causes of illness and prevent the illnesses in the first place, especially with children.
What a meaningful perspective you have, Dr. Sue. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Claire. Take care.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a real pickle that we're in whenever it comes to the MAHA movement. There's not a lot of money in prevention, right? There's not a lot of money in telling people, hey, you should eat healthier food and, stop going to the doctor as much, and all these different things that we, stop using these toxic chemicals and products. A lot of the pillars of moving towards a healthier life is to do less and to consume less. And in a corporate world, this corporatism country that we're living in, this is going to be an issue. So moving forward, I'm really excited to see what solutions we come up with together. I know that we're going to find a way through this. We have to, for my daughter and for the future generations. The failure is not an option. The country and the world that I want my daughter to live in is a world where she and her husband, or whoever's around her in her life, are healthy and happy. And I'm going to keep fighting until that world emerges. You guys, I want to show you a short clip of Beyond Humanity, The Perils and Promises of Transhumanism, a documentary that I made with Daily Clout, Naomi Wolf. This is a short documentary. It's 30 minutes. You can find it for free on my website if you go to clairedooleyfilm.com. We're going to jump to this trailer, and then we're also going to, or this sneak peek, and then you guys are going to take a look at the People's Testament of today.
Transhumanism is simply the quest to merge human beings with their machines to become something more than human. 20 years ago, transhumanism was a sort of fringy, freakish ideology that only a very few people were contemplating. And now you have everyone from the World Economic Forum to Silicon Valley, prominent thinkers at Harvard, at Oxford, at Cambridge, MIT, University of Washington, a number of public figures, political figures are kind of hinting at it. You see that this idea that technology can and should be used to enhance and transform the human being, whether it's called transhumanism or not, has become profoundly influential among our leaders and among the people.
Now we are basically like a species of ants. We live in a huge colony in which each one has this tiny role to play, and we cannot survive outside the colony. And this will only increase in the 21st century. Brain-computer interfaces and biometric sensors and so forth.
And so we will be a hybrid of biological thinking and non-biological thinking, which I believe has already started with these devices outside our body.
We're already a cyborg.
A built-in personal assistant could be implanted right into your brain.
Ultimately, we're going to merge with artificial intelligence to connect our neocortex, that's the outer layer of the brain, that's where we do our thinking, to the cloud.
It is very likely that within, say, 50 years, all the bodies, all the brains would be connected together to a network.
The Internet of Bodies.
And you won't be able to survive if you're disconnected from the net.
But the moment we admit that some appropriate computational system is what the basis of intelligence is, and we admit that we will improve these systems continuously, and we admit that the horizon of cognition very likely far exceeds what we currently know, then we have to admit that we're in the process of building some sort of God. Now would be a good time to make sure it's a God we can live with.
Technologies like vaccine passports, social credit systems, and job automation have the potential to undermine our privacy, freedom, and autonomy. In the wrong hands, technology can be used to control, manipulate, and exploit people.
Science is replacing evolution by natural selection with evolution by intelligent design. Not the intelligent design of some God above the clouds, but our intelligent design and the intelligent design of our clouds. The IBM cloud, the Microsoft cloud, these are the new driving forces of evolution.
Something I realized along the way is that I didn't hate science. I hated scientism. In that same way, I identify as a non-denominational Christian who reads the Bible, because I have seen how religions have been abused throughout history. Transhumanism is often driven by a belief in the power of science and technology to solve all of our problems. This is scientism.
Father of scientism was a French philosopher that lived back in around 1800. He said, "A scientist, my dear friends, is a man who foresees. It is because science provides the means to predict that it is useful, and the scientists are superior to all other men." What he said. He wanted to get rid of the Catholic Church and replace the priests with science and engineers and have them administer science to society, because that was far more beneficial, he said, than religion.
It's very dangerous, Chuck, because a lot of what you're seeing as attacks on me, quite frankly, are attacks on science.
Having grown up in a highly controlled religious organization, the same, governing body leaders of that organization saying, when you speak out against me, you're not speaking out against me, you're speaking out against the word of God. And thinking even further back to when not all humans could read and write, and they were relying on religious officials to interpret the word of God. They used it to control people by misinterpreting the word of God. And so kind of the parallels between that and what we're seeing with science, the same way.
By hacking organisms, elites may gain the power to re-engineer the future of life itself.
And if we are not careful, it can lead to a form of government where experts and technocrats hold all of the power, and where ordinary people have no say.
Is there technology in China that can help the Chinese people? Yes, there is. But it has been turned on them slowly over a period of time, incrementally, where now it's controlling them. They're a technocratic state through and through. They've got cameras everywhere, facial recognition. They've got social credit scoring systems in place. If you jaywalk, pictures taken of you, the fine is taken out of your bank account by the time you get back to your home or apartment. Your social credit score goes down, so maybe you get kicked out of the apartment you're living in because you don't deserve that apartment, they decide. This is micromanagement of people. I haven't read any stories anywhere, honestly, where one single person in China thinks that's all a good idea.
And in a post-COVID world, we've seen technology be taken advantage of. In Canada, for example, Prime Minister Trudeau's response to the trucker protests was genuinely concerning.
And it's amazing to see 50 miles of semi-trucks demanding change of the government. But the Trudeau government wanted to break up the protests. They said, we're going to shut your bank accounts down if you're involved in the protest, or if you're writing about the protest, we're going to shut your bank accounts down.
If your truck is being used in these protests, your corporate accounts will be frozen.
It didn't work out well for the government. In the process, nevertheless, they demonstrated that they could do that.
There are three downsides that I see. So the first downside is the over-reliance on technology so that the human being's capacities are atrophied. And if you don't have cultural norms in place to be able to continually discipline oneself and cultivate virtue alongside technology, then the technology tends to creep in and overtakes those capacities for discipline and virtue. The second, really powerful technologies in the hands of bad actors or in the hands of unwise actors, they give human beings the opportunity to wreak far more havoc than has ever been possible in human history. Everything from nuclear warheads to the engineering of bioweapons, or just the wrong-headed use of technology so that it's deployed recklessly. And you wind up with a lot of downsides, a lot of unintended consequences that everyone basically is stuck with because a technology has become ubiquitous and it's been pushed as a norm for everyone. Vaccines and medication in general can tend to be on that wavelength so that without taking into account everyone's individual needs, you end up with a sort of one-size-fits-all program that can really, really damage people for whom those technologies are not meant for.
When looking to the future, we have to ask ourselves, who will control these technologies? Who will have access to them, and who will be left behind?
And so if you want to go that direction, then all of these upsides are just simply stepping stones to a better and better future. If you don't want to go that direction, then it becomes a very difficult prospect to figure out how you can take and employ properly these technologies for your benefit without being swept up in this sort of cultural revolution that is really occurring that positions technology as the highest power on earth.
Okay, so can you tell us your name, please?
Yes, my name is Terry Nosak.
And this is about your mother.
Yes.
And she took a Moderna, just one or how many?
Just one.
Moderna COVID-19 shot.
Correct. Yes.
Tell us what happened.
Yes. So my mother, she was 96 when she died, and previous to the Moderna shot, she'd been living in senior living, and she'd been quarantined for about a year in the senior living facility that she was at. And we were only able to visit through the window, or she'd go out to her balcony, and we used a fishing line and a basket, and she could kind of reel up goodies and things. But
that's quite sad that that's how you were communicating.
Yeah. She became ill in December of 2020, had to be hospitalized, and they got her stabilized, but she was then needing oxygen and to be in a Foley catheter, and so it was deemed best to discharge her to an adult family home at that point. And she did get on hospice care. However, she was not near death yet. She was actually discharged in quite good condition. They'd really tuned her up well, and she was able to still do most of her own activities of daily living. She was discharged to this facility in January 7th of 2021, and she did okay until she decided they were coming around to nursing facilities and adult family homes and trying to see if the participants would like to take the COVID shot. And so she decided she wanted to do it because her best friend had done it. And I have pictures of my mother and her best friend, Nelda. Nelda had done it, and Nelda was fine.
This is
Hazel.
your mother, and this is your mother's bone, is that right?
This is Hazel, my mother,
Yeah.
and the one on this side is Nelda, and the ashes are my mother. And the cat is Mr. Oliver, my mother's beloved cat. And so anyway, My mother decided, because Nelda and she had other friends who had taken the vaccine, and mind you, they're all in their 90s. Nelda was 100. That she wanted to do that. We actually got in a huge fight over it. I'm a registered nurse. I've been following CDC for years. I didn't want her to do it. And she decided, nope, she wanted to do it. So
why did you not want her to do it?
Why did I not want her to? Because I had been watching the research and all of the podcasts and the real science about what was happening to people with injuries and deaths after these vaccinations. And so anyway, she got the injection on February 6th, and that very evening she started having the fevers, the chills, the nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, the headaches, the muscle pain, and this progressed the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and I would call her healthcare providers, the home care that would come in, starting on the night of the 6th, and again on the 7th and the 8th, and I would request that they go take a look. And I told them verbally, and I have it in writing, I have a lot of documentation around this, that I felt this was a Moderna vax side effects, and that she was having some untoward effects with this. They refused to go out to the house on the 6th and the 7th, where she was staying. On the 8th, late afternoon, they finally went out and they checked her out, and they gave her, and she was getting some Tylenol. But this continued where she was not feeling well, and it was just kind of blown off. On the 9th, the day of her death, I was calling again, talking to her caregiver, talking to the healthcare agency, stating my concerns, and they went out around noon. And about noon, I was working. I received a telephone call telling me that it would be okay if we came out to see my mother. Now, mind you, the whole time, the year prior, and the whole time she's in this facility from January 7th up to the day of her death, February 9th, 2021, we were not allowed inside the facility to visit with my mother. This is my mother, who my sister and I took care of her for about 10 years in terms of, helping her with appointments and groceries and whatever needs she had. And so we were finally being told, well, if you can come, this would be a good time. So I was working, I made an appointment with the facility, my sister and I, to be there at 5 o'clock. We'd come together, and at 4:45 I'm sitting in the driveway. Ironically, my mother had been working on funeral arrangements for some time in the future, and she had wanted me to, she had changed from wanting the pink casket to the urn. Now, her urn that she's buried in is much bigger. This is a smaller version because and she is in here, part of her, but when she dies, she wants Mr. Oliver cremated and put in this one and her buried with him. But anyway, so I'm at the funeral parlor fixing up this order. Mind you, again, we'd been told all up to this time that, things were going pretty good until this very day. And so 4:45, I'm sitting in the driveway of the care facility waiting for my sister to arrive. I get a phone call about, 4:50, 4:55 from the owner of the care facility, and she said, my mother just died. I'm sitting in the driveway, and so I went in at that time. My mother was still warm. I talked to her and spent time with her, and then my sister arrived. So it's just a very crazy situation. not being able to have closure with our mother, during the time after she came out of the hospital, to actually sit and be her daughters. We'd been her caretakers for 10 years, managing every detail of her life, but to not be able to have that closure. The only times we were able to see her was through a window, and she had trouble getting to the window because of the furniture placement, and she didn't hear well, and she didn't see well. So all of that was very difficult to try to have a visit. She could not hear well on a telephone either. So after this happened, I reported the Moderna death. I notified, I did a VAERS report. I contacted Moderna, both on their report line, and spoke to them. The CDC, the Clark County Health Department, the local newspaper. I wrote letters to Governor Jay Inslee, congresspeople in Washington in our district. I called the medical examiner's office. I requested an autopsy and labs. I was denied. This kind of went along with the whole thing about the math never added up. I would use the specific statistics for Clark County that the health department was putting out, and number of people with COVID versus those who were injured, those who died, and the math never, as we all know, it just never added up.
That's a terrible story. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. I researched the policy about visitations because this whole time my mother was in this facility, several times a week I would be asking, when can we come see her? When can we actually be in the room with her? And it wasn't happening. Afterwards, it was determined there was some kind of miscommunication with policies, because policies change so frequently, that the rules changed. It was dynamic, it was confusing. Oh, we were so very sorry. But I used my mother's case, or I attempted to use it as a platform with the adult family agency. There's kind of an umbrella to see if they could do better with other families. So that is what happened to my mom, Hazel, with the death of her Moderna vaccine.
Very sorry to hear that. Did you take the COVID shot?
So here's the rest of the story. So I'm a registered nurse, been a nurse for 40 years, worked at a local healthcare facility in Clark County, Washington. So I got to live the other side of this coin, as did many healthcare workers, where you were gaslighted and dismissed, and you're a hero one day and you're dispensable the next if you won't take the jab. And my particular agency, or where I worked, they would have these, I'll call it a town hall meeting, but they would do these webinars, to try to tell everybody all the rah-rah, why you need to be vaccinated, and then later on it would be for the booster. But if you tried to ask questions, or if you tried to share your concerns, you were blocked. Anything you said would be erased, like in the chat. And then you were kind of a marked person, because I kept trying to type in CDC's website and questions and whatnot, and I was immediately censored. So with that, eventually it got to the point where my employer told employees, and this is an employer that has facilities in Oregon and Washington, and the word was, much as the rest of the country, get the jab or you're fired. 491 people in my institution did not take the jab and were fired. I decided reluctantly to take a Johnson & Johnson jab. I did that in June of 2021. So after doing that, what happened to me was my spouse had become ill with COVID, and he actually almost died. He had very serious COVID, but I did everything I could, worked with he had a wonderful PCP, fortunately, was able to work with him at home with, the nebulizer treatments and the protocols for COVID and changing the position and whatnot. And that took about a month to get him out of that. After I got COVID during that by swab. Okay,
after your shot.
Yes, after the shot, we both got COVID after the shot. Yeah, that worked, right? And so, but I didn't really get sick, and so I asked our primary cares if we could please get the IgG, the serum antibody test, because I wanted to prove I had antibodies, and it was ridiculous because, of course, my employer now wanted the boosters. And so I got it. Mine, the quantitative normal levels around 19. Mine was 450, and my spouse's was 700. But that was not sufficient reason enough to not get the booster according to the employer. However, they never did actually mandate a booster. So I never had anything after that. And at that point, I would have just said, fire me. After I did the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, about a couple of months after, I started experiencing horrific left leg swelling. It would swell up my lower leg twice the size of my right leg. I would get ropey veins. It would turn red, it would be hard, it was heavy, it was bruised and discolored, and I would have these feelings like it just kind of felt like maybe a little microclots or something were going down my vessel. And I also was experiencing up in my head, I'd get horrific, like sudden lightning bolt headaches. I would get short of breath. I thought I was having like little mini strokes, and I was scared to death of having a DVT because I've taken care of patients with pulmonary embolus, and you go and you read all the DVT literature and you see it's like, yep, I've got that, yep. So I during the course of the following 2.5 years had like 3 ultrasounds in my leg. I never had a DVT. I did have superficial clots, and my blood vessel in my leg dilated massively, both up in my thigh area and in my lower leg, which was what was causing my leg swelling, heaviness, pain. I mean, to the point of I couldn't wear a shoe many days. I finally got that fixed in November and December of last year. I can wear a shoe again. I'm no longer in pain. I've just got resolving discoloration. But I am convinced that was from the J&J vaccine. As far as the other, I'm not experiencing the shortness of breath or the lightning bolt headaches or that buzzing feeling like maybe a clot's moving up into my temporal area. It did give me very high blood pressure at the time. I was put on blood pressure meds, that I was not on before. I am still on, and I am weaning down on those. So that is what happened to me personally.
All right, well, thank you for telling. I was sorry about your mum.
Yes, thank you.
Really, really sad, and you as well. Is there
Thank
anything
you.
that will make you take a vaccine again?
No,
We're done.
absolutely not. I am done. I will never take any vaccine ever again. And I am such a advocate now for medical freedom and our Constitution, and I am just, I cannot believe what a departure, the United States, I can't believe where we are today as a nation. I don't recognize it, and I'm a Army nurse veteran. I've lived in other countries. I've lived in countries that are oppressed. I've lived in Saudi. I've worked all over the United States. And I just cannot recognize this country anymore.
Thank you for being with us and telling your story.
Thank you.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.